You don't know the pig family. At least, not the whole family. Peppa may have had siblings who disappeared from the story. Yeah, apparently, Daddy Pig and Mummy Pig had a little more fun than they ever told us about. And there's one image that makes all of this even stranger. The exact picture you saw in this video's thumbnail. Look closely at it. There are extra kids standing right in the middle of the pig family. Kids we don't recognize. You think we just made this up, huh? Then the question that starts this whole story is simple. Who are these kids, and why did they disappear from the pig family?
You know what's starting. It's another awesome Cinewave!
Reality. And there's one detail that makes this story even worse. In real life, the strange thing wouldn't be Peppa having several siblings. The strange thing would be her having so few, George and Eevee. Pigs don't usually have just 1 or 2 babies at a time. A single litter can have several piglets born all at once, so having only 3 kids in that family doesn't really make much sense. So think about that for a second. The most famous pig family on television spent years being made up of Peppa and George, while the actual animal that inspired these characters is known for having big families. Piglets usually come in big groups. Ask your grandma. Okay, sorry, moving on. Of course, this doesn't prove there are hidden siblings in the show. In Peppa Pig, the characters talk, drive cars, and go to school, so using biology here might be asking a little too much from a cartoon. But the theory gets interesting when you notice one thing. The show itself has already shown families much bigger than the pig family, and one of them is so huge, it starts getting difficult to even figure out how many rabbits live in that house.
Wow!
Rabbits. And if you think a huge family would be way too exaggerated for Peppa Pig, the show itself already answered that a long time ago, more than 20 years ago. Because there's one family in this show that feels like it never ends. Seriously, do these people not own a TV? Just look at the rabbits. The series shows a massive group of relatives, especially with all the Miss Rabbit clones. In other words, when Peppa Pig wants to show a big family, it does. And the important part here is that there are so many rabbits because the show is referencing the real world, which means that, according to Peppa Pig's own rules, the real world absolutely counts. And that matters for one simple reason. The pig family isn't small because the cartoon universe only works with a dad, a mom, and 2 kids. That rule simply doesn't exist. There are so many rabbits in this show that if you blink, you've probably already missed the debut of another Miss Rabbit. But then an even stranger question comes up. If the show has absolutely no problem showing huge families, why is Peppa's family specifically so small? And maybe this isn't even exclusive to her, because other kids' shows have also made audiences suspicious about hidden family members the story never showed. Bluey. And maybe Peppa isn't even the only kids' show doing this. And yes, this matters because we're talking about a pattern in the storytelling style of some of the biggest shows in the world. It's almost like a modern trend. Whenever a series leaves a hole in a family's history, you can be sure of one thing: someone is going to notice it. Bluey is a perfect example. For years, fans have searched for clues about things the show never directly explained about the Healer family. Bluey's lost brother is one example. If one famous series could do something like that, what's stopping another one from having something similar? Nothing. And that's exactly where these theories begin. Not because the show clearly tells us that someone disappeared, but because it shows enough pieces to make the audience ask, wait, is someone missing? And yes, someone is. It's almost become a tradition in modern kids' cartoons. But in Peppa's case, we don't even need to look for clues in another show, because there are strange things scattered throughout her own universe. And one of them appears in the last place anyone would expect to find a family secret. On the other side of the world, would you rather be friends with Peppa or Bluey? Comment the hashtag pig so we can get to know you.
Ooh.
The book. And this is where one of the strangest things in this entire universe shows up. Peppa appears in New York. Even though she had never been to New York before the special episode on the other side of the world. You didn't notice that, did you? Of course not. You were paying attention to random stuff and completely missed this detail. In one scene set in the city, you can see a book being sold with Peppa's picture right on the cover. Pause it and look at this. It is literally the same little pig we watch living her life over in England, suddenly appearing on the cover of a book on the other side of the world. and the show never explains why. And yes, this Easter egg can be hard to recognize, but remember, that's Peppa dressed as Little Red Riding Hood because it's a reference to the time she wore that costume in the school play. Is Peppa famous? Did somebody write a book about her? Does Peppa have some kind of international career that happens completely outside the episodes? But the interesting part is something else. Peppa Pig has already shown us that important details can exist inside that universe without the main story ever exploring them deeply or properly explaining them. And once you start looking for those kinds of details inside the episodes themselves, there's a photograph in Daddy Pig's office that becomes very hard to ignore. The photo. Things get much more serious when we pay attention to one detail inside Daddy Pig's office. Because there's a photo sitting on his desk that nobody can properly explain. When Peppa visits his workplace, you can see a photograph sitting in front of the monitor. And at first glance, it just looks like another meaningless background detail. But pause the scene and look closely. There are two little pigs that a lot of people assume are Peppa and George, but that doesn't really work. It makes no sense to confidently say it's them because they're wearing completely different clothes. And in Peppa Pig, you know every character has their standard outfit. Peppa is always wearing her plain red dress, and George is always wearing blue. And that is exactly the kind of detail that makes this theory dangerous. Because we can't look at this picture and say that these definitely aren't hidden relatives of Peppa. We can't. But we also can't pretend the picture isn't there. Maybe it's just decoration. Or maybe Daddy Pig and Mummy Pig have secrets that need to be explained a little better to the fans. And yes, one mysterious photo could still be nothing more than a coincidence. The problem starts when the series itself begins introducing characters who spent years without ever appearing to the audience. And that is exactly what happened with Aunt Dottie. This is the point where our theory stops depending only on strange photos and hidden details. Peppa's family already had an aunt who stayed invisible for years, Aunt Dottie. For a long time, she existed only as someone you heard about, but never actually saw in the series, until the show finally decided to bring Dottie into the story and show that she had been part of the family all along. This happened in the Thanksgiving episode. Pause the scene where she appears and think about what that means. We spent years watching birthdays, trips, visits, parties, and pig family gatherings. And even then, Peppa still had an aunt who wasn't part of any story other than the episode Shiny Little Wheels Horse, where she is only mentioned. It's almost like finding out after 20 seasons that your favorite character had a whole life overseas, and nobody thought it was important enough to bring up during Sunday lunch. But Dottie is still just an aunt who lives far away. The real hole in this family appears when we look at Daddy Pig, because there are two characters who should be extremely easy to find, and they simply aren't there.
But before we talk about them, we have a message for you. And if you're not subscribed yet, you know what to do. Click and hit the bell so you don't miss any videos.
Grandpa and Grandma. Back to it. From this point on, the hole gets much deeper. Peppa has 4 grandparents, but the show has only shown half of them. The Granny Pig and Grandpa Pig you know are on Mummy Pig's side of the family. We know their house, we watch Peppa visit them. We see both of them taking part in the family. But what about Daddy Pig's parents? Nothing! No second pair of grandparents has ever shown up for a visit. No clear explanation of who they are or where they are. And it's not like Daddy Pig is some distant character. He is the main character's father. In the episode Time Capsule, for example, which we're about to show you, there's a scene where we see Daddy Pig as a child and is one of Madame Gazelle's students. In other words, his parents should live in the same town since he grew up there. The fact that they have never appeared makes the Pig family much more incomplete than you might think. Because if they live in town, where are they? If close relatives of Daddy Pig disappeared, how many others disappeared too? Up to this point, you can still say that all of this is just a small detail. The next case is different. Because after more than 2 decades of the show releasing brand new episodes, the Pig family did something nobody expected. Peppa got a new sister. The latest Peppa episodes show exactly why we're right to theorize about this. Something happened that, for more than 20 years, seemed impossible. Eevee arrived. Last year, after decades of watching the exact same pig family lineup, a new little pig was born. There had been 4 of them from the beginning, and now there were 5. And that completely changes the way we look at our lost siblings theory. Because for years, nobody watched Peppa Pig thinking, could there still be someone missing from this family? It felt like we already knew everyone. But we didn't. The show itself proved that we didn't. After 21 years, the series opened up space in the main family and added a brand new sister. The biggest new addition last year. George probably spent years thinking he was going to be the youngest forever. But pay attention, Eevee's birth isn't even the strangest part of this story. Because once you find out why they chose that exact name for her, the idea that there are pig family siblings we never met stops feeling like a theory. It becomes almost a fact. Aunt Eevee. Now comes the strangest part of all. Eevee was named after a pig family relative we have never seen. Yes, Peppa's new sister was named after Mummy Pig's great-aunt Eevee. And nobody had ever heard of her. Think about how huge that detail is. We're no longer talking about a mysterious child in a photograph. We're not talking about a shadow in the background or even some theory created by fans. Mummy Pig herself says in a real-world newspaper that there is a relative with a name, a family connection, and enough importance for her to name her new child after her. And we see an image of this character in a photograph that appears in a morning newspaper over in England. In other words, there are Peppa relatives who have always been there and who we simply never truly got to know. At this point, the pig family doesn't need any more mysteries. It needs a private investigator. And now go back to that picture from the thumbnail. Are those kids Peppa's older siblings? Nobody knows, but after finding out about relatives who stayed off screen this entire time, grandparents who never appeared, and a sister who suddenly showed up out of nowhere 21 years later, one thing is safe to say. The pig family is much bigger than what the show decided to show you. And maybe the question was never, does Peppa have or did she have hidden siblings? Maybe it's something else. How many members of this family are still hidden? Maybe we'll only find out when Peppa suddenly decides to introduce someone else out of nowhere. How much longer do you think it'll take?
It's almost over, but until then, you can stay with us. There are 2 super fun videos waiting for you. Thanks, and see you next time.